It's not lost on anybody that this is part of what I would say is a decades-long now sort of struggle over what the Democratic Party is really supposed to represent.
We're one of the demographics that has one of the most favorable views across the board of socialism. Our movements sometimes haven't tapped into that full potential.
I don't look at Mamdani as a progressive. I look at him as representing the anger and anguish of people who have been left behind.
Coming up on Laura Flanders and Friends, the place where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the people who are doing it. Welcome. The New York City mayor's race is already one for the history books. When Zohran Mamdani, a young state assemblyman from Queens, defeated the state's former governor, Andrew Cuomo, in the primary this summer, it shocked the Democratic establishment and attracted attention from across the country. In the general election this November, Mamdani faces Cuomo, now running as an independent, and Republican Curtis Sliwa, the founder of the Guardian Angels. Mayor Adams has withdrawn, and that tightened the race a bit, but Mamdani is still enjoying a 2-digit lead as we record this. And if he's elected, he'd be the first Muslim American and only the second Democratic Socialist elected mayor of New York City. His victory on a promise to make the metropolis of New York affordable for working people would have implications for politics everywhere. It's already garnering both excitement and anxiety in different quarters. And even reporters in places with a whole lot else going on are watching, as you'll find out. This month, on the feature we call Meet the BIPOC Press, we've invited from New York City, Felipe De La Hoz, a contributing editor for the New Republic, editor of the weekly newsletter Borderlines, and a journalist at Epicenter NYC. From Dearborn, Michigan, we're joined by Osama Siblani, the longtime publisher and founder of the Arab American News, the largest Arab American newspaper in the country. Siblani is also one of the founders of the local Arab American Political Action Committee. And from Chicago, we have Asha Ransby-Sporn, columnist for In These Times and co-founder of Black Youth Project 100. She was very involved in the campaign to elect Chicago's own progressive-backed mayor, Brandon Johnson, in 2023, and has some thoughts about what that story could have to teach the Mamdani campaign. For this week, our conversation is, what would Mamdani's victory signal for the nation, and why is it already so significant? Thank you all. I hope I'm not overstating the degree to which all eyes are focused on New York City when you do, in fact, have quite a lot going on. Asha, I mean, you are in the heart of a lot happening in Chicago right now, and I appreciate you taking the time. How are you doing? And are you actually as focused on Mamdani as this introduction would suggest?
I'm pretty focused locally. We have really are facing a military invasion. It's just like, I don't think I can overstate the degree to which the chaos that Border Patrol and ICE has been causing, not only in immigrant communities, but in Black communities and working class communities all across the city. And I think that's important for the New York City folks to think about and make sure that we're connecting to a kind of national movement. And I think that that's the type of leadership, whether it's Zohran Mamdani, talking about making a city like New York work for the working class and not just the rich, or a Brandon Johnson, standing up and saying, federal agents are not welcome here. They can't use city property for, harassing Chicagoans. That's the type of bold leadership that we're going to need on our side to go up against these fascists and kind of try to get some of the more run-of-the-mill establishment types who are getting in our way out.
You put your finger on something really important, which is that our commercial media love to have individual heroes and individual stories. And Zohran Mamdani's is certainly a great one. But as you point out, he's not alone. Coming to you, Felipe, how are you balancing those two things? And how are you thinking about his campaign right now? What's unique and special and extraordinary about it? And also what reflects what Asha said as a broader wave of change?
Yeah, I think there are a few things happening here. I mean, to have an incumbent mayor who was up until pretty recently running for re-election polling at 7-8% is almost unheard of. And I think it's sort of reflective of the ways that the local electorate has viewed, Eric Adams' administration as fundamentally a corrupt one, and one that's, also too close for comfort to the Trump administration, which is very unpopular here in many parts of the country. And so, there is a part of that is a sort of a repudiation of that way of doing business to some extent. I also think that the Mamdani campaign, its success has been in part predicated on what everyone will tell you is the most important thing in an electoral campaign like this, which is getting out there, talking to voters. Ground game was absolutely massive for their primary win. And, it's not rocket science. It's simply a fact of connecting with people who were sort of disassociated from politics and presenting a vision that, while it is progressive and presents a lot of sort of progressive points, is fundamentally about affordability and about some other things that are issues that people resonate with, and kind of are welcoming alternative vision of.
How do you explain, Felipe, New York is home to the Democratic Party's House and Senate leadership. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are right there. Neither one, at the time of this recording, have endorsed Mamdani. How do you explain that? Do you think that will shift? And is that significant to you?
It's not lost on anybody that this is part of what I would say is a decades-long now sort of struggle over what the Democratic Party is really supposed to represent. Everybody understands that Mamdani is positing a different approach, is sort of, willing to stand up to some of the, party dogma. And I think there's a sort of a caution among some of the Democratic leadership to embrace that, even if it's overwhelmingly clear at this point that he's probably going to win, and they're going to have to work with him, right? And that's why we've had some grudging sort of endorsements, like from Governor Hochul, right, who finally came around. People are realizing that the writing is on the wall.
Osama, coming to you there in Dearborn, the Arab American News polled Arab American leaders once the primary was over about the success of Mamdani in that primary this summer. What did you find people were thinking about Mamdani from that point of view?
First of all, we're fixated on what's happening in the Middle East, especially in Gaza and in Lebanon. But again, 7,000 miles away, we are not able to make a difference there, but we're looking at what we can make here in order to make a difference. And as you can tell, it's a municipality election in New York and other areas, including Dearborn and Dearborn Heights, where a capital of Arab America. This election is pretty much set. I think the result of it is set in here. However, New York and Mamdani comes in as a focus, a very important focus for our community and for the country as a whole. I believe what Mamdani is representing in here is a part of the Democratic Party that has been revived. And I believe that Jeffrey and Schumer are not responding to him or not supporting him is because they represent the dying party of the Democratic Party. I don't look at Mamdani as a progressive. I look at him as representing the anger and anguish of people who have been left behind with the political apparatus, and they do not see what's happening to them, whether it's in rent, it's food, it's schooling, education, public health, everything that they have been left behind. So he's addressing these issues, and that's why he has this kind of support. I believe Mamdani is leading a revolution in here. It's happening in New York, the Big Apple, but I think that it's going to spread all over the country.
You have mentioned the candidacies of others in your region, Osama, and Abdul El-Sayed running for U.S. Senate is a big one. What do you think you're seeing there in terms of a new electorate turning out, or an electorate perhaps that demands that we take a different look at some constituencies that perhaps we've been making assumptions about?
So it really doesn't matter anymore what is your name, whether it's Abdul Sayed or John Smith. It really doesn't matter. What matters is you're talking about issues that are important to people. And they're feeling, especially today, they're feeling the pain in their pockets and on their dinner table, and also in their kids' schooling and in their public health. So I really believe that there is a change in attitude also on foreign policy. Usually foreign policy is not something on the radar of American people. or American voters. But today, with what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in Ukraine and how our foreign policy is being operated and conducted, people are very angry. There are polls that are being conducted, and we're looking at it, and we see the majority of American people are shifting from both parties and going into independence. Here in Michigan, we have the mayor of Detroit, Mike Duggan, who is running as an independent for governor because he doesn't see in the Democratic Party anything that resembles what Michiganders want.
Vermont's independent Senator Bernie Sanders was up there campaigning for El Sayed, and he's been campaigning for Zohran Mamdani as well in New York. You wrote recently, Asha, that Mamdani's campaign was doing something the Sanders campaign never managed regarding black voters and the need for us to change perhaps our sense of that black voter archetype.
My work has been in Black communities, in Black movement, and then I also, I consider myself a part of the left and have, supported progressive and leftist and socialist candidates and all of that. And so I'm always thinking about, well, what is that intersection and why doesn't it feel bigger? You look at polling of Black American adults, and especially on economic issues, but on a wide range of things, we're one of the demographics that has one of the most favorable views across the board of socialism. We tend to support things like investing in good jobs, expanding the public sector, universal health care. And there's a way in which our movements sometimes haven't tapped into that full potential. And I think that is important organizing and political work to be done. And so, we saw in the days after the primary, there were some takes saying majority Black precincts went for Cuomo, and used that, which is in part true, but it's not a data point that actually tells the whole story there. Because if you then look at the polling going in or some of the exit polls, what you see is that among Black voters that knew who Mamdani was, he had enormously high support. And what I see in my organizing is that I, more so than I am concerned with Black people being pulled to the right or being pulled in by Trump, while there is a, there are some people who are being pulled that way.
Some disturbing polling recently, but keep going.
Yes. And I've dug into that. But even more so than that, I think what we see are people who are disengaged and feel like our political system isn't going to deliver for them at all, who feel let down by the establishment Democratic Party that has really sold all of us out for decades, and Black people have borne an enormous amount of the brunt of that impact.
Felipe, the race has changed a little, I think, since New York Attorney General Letitia James came on board strongly behind Zohran Mamdani. And in just the last few weeks, we've seen huge rallies happen with Letitia James and Mamdani specifically representing a sort of face of defiance against ICE raids and in support of the immigrant population in New York. What are you seeing that you think is important about all that? And is it significant for policy going forward?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think Tish James has enormous credibility here for a number of reasons. I mean, she has a very interesting and sort of varied career in politics. She was public advocate, became attorney general at a pretty pivotal moment, and was actually sort of one of the forefront national figures actually holding Trump to account during his first term, and subsequently, right, famously brought the prosecutions, against him. The only ones that really ultimately stuck, those were more like Alvin Bragg, but, the investigations onto the Trump organization and whatnot. And, now has been actually indicted by the Trump administration in a nakedly political fashion, which I think, goes to show the extent to which she was a real antagonist to that administration, which actually I think helps Mamdani, again, because of the unpopularity of the Trump administration here. And so she's someone who's got a lot of credibility and a lot of, clout in different sort of parts of the party, right? She's someone who is actually very well respected in sort of moderate parts of the party here, if a little begrudgingly. And she has a lot of credibility in sort of left-leaning circles. And so I think she's a good avatar to kind of bring together some of those things. And I think, do what Mamdani increasingly doesn't need, but has needed for a good part of this campaign, which is essentially have people vouch for him, right? He was a virtual unknown, 7, 8 months ago. I mean, zero name recognition. And so, to kind of ping off what Asha was saying as well, he's someone who I think needed kind of trusted local interlocutors to really say, like, no, this guy's for real. So he is someone who, he'll be out at an event, someone will be like, you're a socialist. And he'll be like, yep, now let's talk about the buses, right? And I think that, that seems like a simple enough strategy, but it's one that I think a lot of, sort of left-leaning candidates haven't adopted because there's this sense that they have to essentially be like apologizing for their policy prescriptions and their stances. And, Mamdani has not done that. He has fully embraced the positions that he's taken, the things he said. He's obviously been questioned a lot about certain, sporadic statements that he's made, and he's walked back on some very, very minor points, like something he said about the police years ago or whatever, and that's just politics for you. But for the most part, he very much embraces who he is and what his policy prescriptions are. And, he's someone who will say, yeah, we're going to get ICE out of New York City. We're going to, defend, we're going to freeze the rents the entire time that, I'm mayor. Can he get ICE out of New York City? Probably not, right? That there's not really a legal mechanism for that, but it doesn't really matter, right? You campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. People like that. People, understand what he's trying to convey, even if, some of it is kind of, procedurally iffy. And so I think that, his sticking to the script and sticking to his message unapologetically, not, all the time saying sorry for having these positions, is partly what his secret sauce is. And that he just seems like a nice guy, go up to him on the street and have a conversation.
Now, that hasn't necessarily saved him from some pretty brutal coverage in the media. And we have to say the New York Times especially has spent a lot of ink reminding people of his position, criticizing U.S. support for Israel during the Gaza war, standing up for Palestinian rights, showing up at demonstrations. Coming to you, Osama, what, perhaps this is a leading question, are commercial media getting wrong about that part of his platform as it relates to his popularity?
I'm sure you've heard of this saying that you believe in one person that can change the world. I think that I do. Mamdani is one of those people because he is really changing the world from the largest city in the United States in this campaign. And he's changing a lot of things. And that's why the mainstream media is going after him, because the mainstream media, unfortunately, this is the same media that went for the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and they beat the drums for war. And they helped George Bush and Tony Blair for their invasion of Iraq for unsubstantiated accusations of weapons of mass destruction. So I think that they have lost a lot of their respect and a lot of their readership because of this. And also social media has taken a toll on them as well, because they are telling what's happening. We know right now what Mamdani is saying, not through the New York Times, not through the Washington Post, unfortunately, but through social media. And it's making its way to the hearts and minds of people around the country. And that's why I believe one person can change the world. Mamdani is one of them.
Now, Asha will say, but there's a movement behind Mamdani, not to say a coalition. And I loved the phrase that you used in a recent discussion with our friend Dan Denver at The Dig, where you talked about the lessons of the Brandon Johnson experience there in Chicago as mayor for the Mamdani future. And you say we have experienced a certain amount of, I think you said, coalitional strain. What is the takeaway lesson, Asha, from Chicago so far, from your point of view?
Yeah. And I just want to appreciate Osama's point, which I think is an important complement to mine about movements and coalition, is that I do also think this is a time when we need leadership. And I think that we should want that. I think sometimes our communities are so used to being let down by people in positions of power that we actually take this posture that we don't want any power at all, or we don't want the people who are on our side to be successful. And so it's a growing edge to figure out how do we actually support and have the back of people who we do believe can be champions and can be leaders in their own right. And, getting really good at being able to distinguish a leader when they are going to champion the demands and the vision of a movement.
Correct me if I'm wrong. My feeling around Chicago was there was huge anticipation and excitement around Brandon Johnson's campaign and his victory as a progressive win for the left. Mm-hmm. And since then, a lot more criticism, although maybe that's changed in this confrontation with ICE.
Yeah, I do think that it took reorientation. We have had decades of mayors in Chicago that have sold off parts of public infrastructure to make money for their friends, who have, run the city like a, deal-making machine with, a patronage system just to hold on to political power. And we have run campaigns in a city that has been the heart of experimenting with neoliberal reforms that have made our city more unequal along the lines of race and class. So movements have come together and blamed Chicago mayors for the choices that they've made. And so the way that we understand politics is through the eyes of kind of like the buck stops with the person on the fifth floor, as we say in Chicago, or that's where the mayor's office is in City Hall. And I think that one of the big lessons is that, there are real challenges to governing a big city as a progressive executive. And there are a lot of other people and power structures that influence the decisions that you can make or the things that happen. And I think just the public education to show that we may have elected a mayor, but the same people, the same companies, the same money that elected a Rahm Emanuel who closed 50 schools or, made other decisions, along the line with a kind of privatization neoliberal agenda of like cutting back spending that supports the everyday people and the working class. That political class, those operatives, that political money is still in the ecosystem being spent to shape the political reality, to oppose or support measures that do or don't hurt their pockets. And they're very much still activated. And then, there are things that only the governor has the power to do. Now we're in this moment where Trump is making massive cuts. He just pulled $2 billion that was meant to fund the extension of our red line, our train, to reach more of the like Black and working class parts of the South Side. He's finding all of these ways to really target our city economically too. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of unity and a lot of clarity about what side we're on, and the sides feel very clear.
Coming to you, Osama, in that delicate balance that you've identified between individual history makers and the movements that they're a part of, and I hear you, we need both. Where do you think your reporting and the reporting of institutions like yours has strength, perhaps, over the commercial media that at this point seems so incredibly cowed in any case, but never covered movements well?
For the last 41 years, since the establishment of the Arab American News, many things have changed in the cities that we were operating in, especially in Dearborn. Dearborn, as in the history, was a racist town. It was pushing everybody who was not white outside of the city. And when I started the newspaper in 1984, the mayor launched a campaign headline, "Let's talk about the Arab problem," because the Arabs were coming in from the windows when the doors were shut in the face of African Americans and other ethnic groups. And he won. He was number 3 in the polls, and he came out to win in 1985 and become the mayor of Dearborn. But what happened 40 years later? Abdullah Hussein Hammoud is the mayor of Dearborn today. The president of the city council is Mohammed Sar'ini. The head of the district court is Salim Salami. Both of them, all of them are Lebanese American. The head of the police is Isa Shaheen, who is an Egyptian American. So we have changed. Also in Dearborn Heights, in Hamtramck, in Canton, everywhere in Birmingham, things are moving forward. So I think we've made a difference in trying to bring our community back into the political and the electoral process. This is where you can make a difference. This is why we admire what Mamdani is doing, what Abdullah Hammoud is doing, what Mo Baidoun is doing in Dearborn Heights, because they're bringing our community, lifting our community, bringing them in order to participate, vote, because voting is the power of the people, and they have a chance to make it every year. whether it's municipality, whether it's midterm or presidential election. We have made a great deal of progress here in Michigan. It's a swing state, as you know, Laura, and we have done a great deal in educating our community on how to vote. So we try to educate our community. We try to encourage them to become public servants, to engage with other communities, and to participate in the political process. And that's how we can change.
Asha, Felipe, Osama, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. I look forward to having you again back on the program.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for having me.
Viewers, don't forget we have uncut versions of every conversation available free to the subscribers to our podcast, and all that information is at our website. Till the next time, stay kind, stay curious. Thanks for watching. For more on this episode and other forward-thinking content, subscribe to our free newsletter for updates, my commentaries, and our full uncut conversations. We also have a podcast. It's all at lauraflanders.org.